Okay, last time we saw that the body theorist, feeling like the underdog, begins by sort of saying, here's why so many people accept mind theory. And now I, as the underdog, am going to show you what's wrong with the reason to accept mind theory. So the body theorist says so many people accept mind theory because they think body switching makes sense, and it only makes sense if mind theory is true. But, says the body theorist, I'm going to show you that body switching doesn't even make sense. So let's imagine Queen Victoria here. The idea goes. Queen Victoria has various mental features. She has certain attitudes, she has certain beliefs, she has certain desires, she sees the world in a certain way, she has a certain level of anxiety, a certain level of hopefulness, and so on and so forth. Um, Now, I want you to imagine someone in a mental hospital who claims to be Queen Victoria. Her body is very different from Queen Victoria's, but she says, I am Queen Victoria. Moreover, when we investigate, we find out that her personality is strikingly similar, that her beliefs are strikingly similar, that her desires are strikingly similar. So the idea goes, by mind theory, she is Queen Victoria because her mind is more or less the same as Queen Victoria's mind. That is qualitatively the same. Now, the body theorist says, look, nobody's going to say that. There's a million Napoleons in mental institutions, the idea goes, and they're in there for good reason. It's not the case that each of them is Napoleon because his beliefs are sufficiently Napoleon-like and his desires and personality are sufficiently Napoleon-like. Instead, they're just people who have the same beliefs and desires and personality as Napoleon, and this is just a person who has the same beliefs, desires, and personality as Queen Victoria. It's not Queen Victoria, it's just another distinct person with the same beliefs, desires, and so on. Well, says the body theorist, that's how we should think of body switching cases. When you watch Freaky Friday, you should really think, look, the mom has just had a sort of nervous breakdown and is acting like a child, and it just so happens that the child has had the reverse nervous breakdown. And the body theorist will often push you in this direction by saying, what would you do if this really happened? Like, suppose you walk into your parents' house and you're uh, you know, suppose you walk into a house and there's a mother and a father and you know them well. It could be your parents, could be someone else's parents. And you see that the mother is just saying all the things the father usually says. And the father is saying all the things the mother usually says. And when you start to talk to the mother, she claims, actually, I'm the father. We've just switched bodies. And when you talk to the mother, she says, the father, he says, actually, I'm the mother. We've just switched bodies. Would you really believe that they've switched bodies? Or instead, would you just say, look, it looks like there's been some sort of weird nervous breakdown on the part of each of them. Or they're having a game, they're playing with me, gaslighting me, or whatever. The body theorist says you'd obviously conclude that they're just tricking you or they've had a nervous breakdown or something. You wouldn't say that they somehow switched bodies. Even if this persisted for a long period of time, you wouldn't say that. You would say instead, the father has changed his personality quite a bit and the mother has done the same. So the idea goes, body switching really isn't something we think makes any sense. Instead, when we watch the body switching movies, we just kind of stipulate something nonsensical, that the person has switched bodies. Now, that's a kind of informal argument that is a loose argument against body switching. But the author of the paper, we're following a paper by Judith Thomson right now. The author of that paper, Judith Thomson, offers a more rigorous argument. And the more rigorous argument goes like this. Imagine we have an evil scientist here on the left. And then we have three people, brown, purple, and red. And the reason it says BB is because that stands for brown's body, and PB stands for purple body, and RB stands for red's body. Now, here's what the evil scientist is going to do. The evil scientist is going to copy the mentality of the person inhabiting Brown's body, or of Brown, if that's the same thing. That is going to copy all of the mental characteristics associated with Brown's body, and then destroy Brown's body and stick those mental characteristics in both purple and red, overwriting any mental characteristics that purple and red may have had. So after their operation, purple says, I'm brown, and red says, I'm brown. And purple believes and hopes and fears just as brown did, and red believes and hopes and fears just as brown did, and so on and so forth. So we're going to perform that operation. We destroy brown, And now the evil scientist asks Purple and Red, who are you? And both of them say, sorry, the people, Purple Body and Red Body, who are you? And both of them say, I am brown. I want what I used to want before that strange body switching happened. I believed what I used to believe before that strange body switching happened. And I remember what I used to remember before that strange body switching happened. Okay, so here's Thompson's argument. Thompson says, look, if mind theory is true, and notice I'm not saying mind theory is true, Thompson rejects mind theory in favor of body theory. Instead, Thompson says, if mind theory is true, then here's what we know. We know that the person inhabiting brown is the same person as the person inhabiting purple because they have the same psychology, the same mind. And the person inhabiting brown is the same person as the person inhabiting red because they have the same psychology. Well, the person inhabiting red and the person inhabiting purple also have the same psychology. So if mind theory is true, says Thompson, they're also identical. That is, brown is identical with purple, and brown is identical with red, and red is identical with purple. Okay. Notice that this final identity sign follows from the first two by the transitivity of identity, right? If brown is identical with purple and brown is identical with red, it follows that red is identical with purple. So we're kind of stuck with that identity up there. But notice that that identity has to be wrong. Purple and red are distinct individuals. That is, the person who is purple and the person who is red are not identical people. It's easy to see this. They occupy distinct spatial locations. You can't have a single person be wholly located in two different places. But the person inhabiting purple's body is wholly located where purple's body is located, and the person inhabiting red is wholly located where red's body is located. So these are distinct individuals occupying distinct spots in the world. So they can't be identical. But the idea goes, mind theory implies that they are. Because mind theory says, look, purple and brown are identical, red and brown are identical, and it follows by transitivity of identity that red and purple are identical. So the idea goes, mind theory must be false. So let's lay this out as an argument. Premise one says, given the mental criterion, which is what falls out of mind theory, given the mental criterion, it follows that for any people x and y are identical if and only if x's mind is appropriately connected to y's mind. That's just the definition of mind theory. So you can't, if you're a mind theorist, you can't object to that. Now, premise two says Brown's mind is appropriately connected to both the mind in red's body and the mind in purple's body. And that's just true by how we're describing the case. You can't really object to that because we're just saying, imagine it happened. So it follows that if the mind criterion is true, if mind theory is true, then pre-operation Brown, the person who was in Brown's body prior to the operation, is identical with both the person associated with post-op red's body and the person associated with post-op Brown's body. Sorry, purple's body. Well, if Brown is identical with both of these people, then these people are identical with one another. That's just the transitivity of identity. So, given the mind criterion, the person associated with post-op red's body is identical with the person associated with post-op purple body. But of course, that's wrong because they occupy distinct spatial locations and therefore can't be a single individual. So the mental criterion, which is implied by mind theory, is false, and so mind theory is false. So that's Thompson's argument against mind theory, and it's a very powerful argument. Anyone who wants to retain mind theory in the face of this argument is going to need to find a way to reply. And there's a couple of different avenues of reply, but we're going to look at an avenue that comes from Derek Parfit, who we'll look at next time. Now, just as a teaser for next time, here's one consequence Parfit thinks understanding his theory will have. Well, he thinks if you understand it, you'll believe it. And once you believe it, he thinks, you should no longer fear your distant death. In fact, he thinks you will no longer fear your distant death. That's a pretty awesome result, right? If you could really give up on fearing death, distant death anyway, because of a philosophical theory, that would be huge. And we'll talk a little more about that next time when we look at Parfit's theory. We'll stop there.